Hi, I'm Dr. Patrick Anderson of Madison Maximized Living. Did you ever have a maximized or a peak day where everything just worked better? In athletics, that's when records are broken. Athletes and Maximized Living sports performance chiropractors have a special relationship. Maximized Living doctors are the official chiropractors for USA Wrestling, USA Track and Field, USA Weightlifting, USA Martial Arts, the NFL Retired Players Association, and the LPGA, as well as a host of other organizations. Through a checkup and adjustments, the athletes and non-athlete alike perform better, recover faster, and have less injuries. In sports, chiropractic is often the missing link and the winning edge. Join co-host Stacy Hansen and myself as we talk sports performance with USA Wrestling's Mitch coming up next.
And welcome to Maximize Living with Dr. Patrick Anderson. We're talking athletes and sports performance today. Now, the doctors at Maximize Living are associated with a lot of teams, correct? Actual athletic teams.
Yes, they are. For quite some time, we are the official chiropractors for USA Wrestling, USA Weightlifting, USA Martial Arts. USA Track and Field is a new one, so that's really fun too. And then the NFL Retired Players Association and the Ladies Professional Golf Association and a whole bunch of others like that. So it's really exciting working with the best of the best.
Well, that's amazing. That's really prestigious. That's wonderful. Now, how does chiropractic help these athletes, I have to ask?
Well, it really helps them perform better, believe it or not, because when your muscles and nerves, when your nerves fire your muscles, they're stronger. When your joints are in good alignment, you have better balance. You're faster at doing anything you command your body to do. You have better proprioceptive, where you sense things. So number one, you perform better, which is what the athlete's really looking for.
Yeah.
And it's across the board, it happens. Recover faster. An athlete wants to train hard. They want to really push their workouts. And they just as soon to eat, go to sleep, and get up and work out again right away. In fact, that's kind of some of the training that's coming on. And so what chiropractic does is just help revitalize and balance the body right after a hard performance so they're ready to go again. And then by keeping the body in good balance and stable, even leg length, everything in good alignment, injuries are reduced. So the effect of chiropractic is just profound for the athlete.
So it really can benefit them quite a bit. Now, you and I have talked quite a bit about athletics. I know you have a big interest in it. How did that get started for you?
Well, I went to a small town high school, and it really didn't have a lot of sports way back then. We had football and basketball and track and that, but I got interested in doing weightlifting. I was stronger than the average kid, so I started to work at it harder, and I ended up winning state championships as a sophomore, junior, and senior in powerlifting. And then I had a back injury because I didn't have good coaching at the time. There wasn't really much for coaches. And then I went to a chiropractor, and that's how I got to be one eventually, it was through that. And then I got involved in athletics when I went to chiropractic school. My roommate started the National Council on Extremity Adjusting. So we had wrist wrestling going on in our house all the time. Instead of a dinner table, we had a wrist wrestling table. And we actually trained a world champion out of there, and a couple of national champions and 3-4 state champs.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that's really...
And then I got into doing bodybuilding. I did 8-10 contests in bodybuilding, and that was fascinating to do that. Did couples bodybuilding, and now I just work out for pleasure because I don't think I would get up on stage and flex anymore.
Yeah, I think he still could, right? It's quite a success story, really, for anyone out there in high school who's just kind of getting into sports. I mean, look at how much you can do. I mean, we're talking about Mr. Universe here.
Yeah, I did take care of 2 Mr. Universes and a Miss Olympia, and just with this sports exposure and extremity certification. These athletes just love chiropractic. And one of them, Mr. Universe, had hurt his low back doing a low cable row. And he came in and he couldn't even raise his leg in the air. He was weak. He had all the muscle in the world. He had like 34-inch thighs. He was in contest shape. But he couldn't even hold his leg when he was laying on his stomach. He couldn't even hold his leg up in the air.
Oh, no.
And it was from a pinched nerve in the lower back. So I examined him, took x-rays, and I found out his 5th lumbar vertebra was badly rotated. And I adjusted, and what was fascinating is that immediately after the adjustment, he had full strength. I could not push his leg down as hard as I tried. And so that's how the nerves control muscle function, and that's why it's so important for athletes to get checked and to see if there are areas where the body isn't firing right, because they're going to be prone to be hurt, and they're not going to perform as well.
Wow, so you can be as strong as can be, and if you've just got one little vertebra twisted wrong, I mean, that can do it.
And then there was another individual who was an Olympic medalist, and for 20 years he couldn't raise his shoulder. And I thought, well, I've got some experience in this, let's work with it. And we found out he had a problem at his clavicle on both sides and rotator cuff impingement. And worked with him for quite some time during the visit, and by the end he was able to raise his arm completely up in the air.
Wow, and I bet he was so grateful too.
Yeah, and because people think they can't function when yet you probably in many cases can restore at least part of that function.
And it can be so simple as just visiting a chiropractor.
Yes.
Well, stay with us. We have more on sports performance right after this. Have your questions for Dr. Pat answered on an episode of Maximize Living. Email Dr. Pat at cw57.tv. And welcome back to Maximize Living with Dr. Patrick Anderson. We're talking about sports performance today and athletes. You were sharing with us some interesting stories that you've had in the field. You've got a lot of experience. You were also a teacher in extremity adjusting, is that right?
Yes, I was just in Atlanta teaching the Sports Performance Council for Maximize Living.
You still are?
Oh, yeah. And it's just fascinating. Some of my background in that, I started about 30 years ago teaching extremity adjusting. And so I've been on the national board called the Council on Extremity Adjusting. And we're a certifying body for chiropractors. They take a 100-hour course, and they get a designate that says they're certified in treating extremities. So I've done about 200 of those courses through the years. So about 2,000 hours of teaching and about 2,000 doctors. So what I like about that is that I learn from every one time I get to teach, I learn from the doctors all their different techniques as I'm showing them a good system. So I've got to travel to Europe, Canada, the United States, taught at national conventions, and took care of many different celebrities through the years as I go around to different places.
I don't suppose you can name names.
Well, not too much. One did win the Stanley Cup twice as a goalie, and you know what he said? He said, I could have never played 17 years in the National Hockey League without my chiropractic care.
Wow.
And that's a common thread in what we hear about athletes and chiropractors with their adjusting. And we're just saying that extremity adjusting is part of that because of all the work on the feet, knees, hips, you know, hands, shoulders, elbows.
Well, that's cool. That's very prestigious. Congratulations on that, and I'm sure there's many more to come. So tell us a little bit more about, with athletes, the spinal adjustments, the extremity adjustments.
Yeah, so some of the things we see, we'll kind of just take a little tour of the body. So we'll see athletes who sprain their ankle, runners, football players, and there are adjustments to the ankle bones that really speed up ankle injury recovery. There's things like turf toe, the great toe has a problem. There's plantar fasciitis, which a lot of people get, and that has a lot to do with the arches in the feet and misalignment of the ankle bones and the forefoot bones. So there's a lot we do with that. And then the knee can be torqued fairly easily. It'll misalign medial or lateral or posterior, and the adjustments work well for that. We'll find hip problems in the ball and socket of the hip where a person doesn't stand very long, or they can't stand a long time without their legs starting to ache. So there are specific adjustments for rotational problems in the thigh, in the femur. And then of course the sacroiliac and alignment of the pelvis, the lumbar spine, all of that really matters to keep right for the athlete. And then of course neck, injuries, concussions, any blows to the head. Chiropractic really helps speed up recovery. Rest is very important, of course, but chiropractic really speeds up recovery. And then we get into the hand and wrist. Athletes get their hands stepped on, they fall in an awkward position, elbows get injured, rotator cuff syndrome develops, and there's a lot of things that we can do for them through our tests and adjustments that are very unique, and it's all without pain medications.
That's wonderful.
No opiates involved in a chiropractor's office.
Yes, because you're hearing a lot about that in the news now, with things going wrong for people with that so quickly and so easily.
In fact, there was just a study I read the other day where they feel opiates may increase the level of pain even on a permanent basis.
Oh no.
It was affecting the glial cells. It was a certain kind of cell, and it was causing more pain in the person because they took opiates. So they may have their place, but boy, it's very scary stuff.
Right, and they can be addictive too as well.
Highly addictive.
Yeah, that's scary stuff. Now what about, we talked a lot about athletes, but what about non-athletes? What would you want them to know from this?
Well, I'd want the non-athlete to know that the similar injuries happen to them. Non-athletes fall, they overdo it, they're not used to it. The athlete's just trained more so they can take more, but some of the same mechanical principles are present that will cause injury, like a foot pronation or a short leg or a bad posture in the shoulders. All of those things need to be checked and balanced so not only just the athlete, but the average person doesn't get injured either.
So it can be affecting anybody out there watching, not just those that are working out a ton, seeing a lot of action on the field.
Actually, it's almost worse sitting on the couch. Motion deficiency syndrome is really hard on your joints. Our bodies are meant to move. They don't function well when we don't move enough.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot about that in the news too. People talking about the worst thing you can possibly do is sit all day.
Yeah.
Makes me want to stand up right now, Dr. Pat.
Well, we can do some exercises while we do this if you like.
Maybe during the break. We
right.
will do that. Well, coming up next, we're going to have some interviews with USA Wrestling's Mitch Hull. Stay with us. Have your questions for Dr. Pat answered on an episode of Maximize Living. Email Dr. Pat at cw57.tv.
Welcome back to Maximize Living. Our guest today is Mitch Hull. Mitch has been the state champion from Evansville. He's been the Big Ten champion. He competed for the United States at 4 World Championships. He's been the national teams director for 20 years in wrestling, and he's consulted in 6 Olympics. Mitch, welcome to Maximize Living. What a history you've had in the wrestling sport. You're around so many athletes that have amazing qualities. What sets them apart from the average aspiring athlete person?
That's a great question, because having worked with the past 6 Olympic Games with the U.S. Olympic Committee and being out in Colorado Springs at the Olympic Training Center, you got to see a lot of athletes and the different ones. And the reality is, the thing that is the same, didn't matter what sport it was that they all had a filter. And they had the same filter. If you want to be great, what their filter is simply this: will I do it or not, based on, will this help me win a gold medal or won't it? And it's a simple filter. It's the one that we can use in life. It's the case where, my filter simply is that old wristband that you used to see wear around, is what would Jesus do with my life? But theirs is so simple and fine. It's just, will this help me or not? And if it doesn't, I'm not doing it.
We've had quite a few athletes from the United States who have been absolute phenomenal. Who comes to mind that's coming up for our U.S. wrestling team?
Well, we just had our Olympic trials here earlier in April, and there's really 4 of them that stand out. One is Jordan Burroughs, who I think is probably the greatest athlete that we have in this country, almost in any sport. He is potentially going to be the winningest wrestler in the history of the United States if he keeps this up. Kyle Snyder, who just actually won the NCAA championships, is a world champion at 19 years of age. He's the youngest world champion in U.S. history, and he replaced a Wisconsin wrestler, Lee Kemp, who was 21 when he won it almost over 30 years ago.
At age 19, that's incredible.
Yep, and we have 2 more. And women's wrestling was added in the 2004 Olympic Games, and right now we have 2 that could be our first Olympic champions, in Adeline Gray and Helen Maroulis. And Helen trained for a year or 2 in Wisconsin as well.
Oh, that's incredible. Any chance we could see the U.S. Olympic trials coming to Madison?
Well, we've had the World Team trials, and you have actually helped at that, but we've had the World Team trials 2 years in 13 and 14, or excuse me, in 2014 and 15. We had the World Team trials here in Madison, and we did meet with USA Wrestling out there, and the Sports Corp and the athletic department we've been talking with, and we're gonna, if it's open and that, we've got a bid plan to try to get the 16 Olympic trials here in Madison.
Oh, that would
excuse me, the 2020 Olympic trials in Madison.
That would be absolutely awesome. It would be great for Madison. Many of the athletes use chiropractic care and have gone to Maximize Living doctors. How does that influence them?
Well, as I kind of said at the beginning earlier about, will this help me win a gold medal or won't it? And certainly our sport in wrestling, I probably use this chiropractic and benefits as much from it as any sport. And you know, you can go back to when I was in college, and you helped me get through my senior year.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, that was a long time, but you helped me get through my senior year. I mean, I'm a absolute believer in the benefits of chiropractic, and Maximize Living has been a part of USA Wrestling. They're a national sponsor, but outside of the sponsorship, the benefits our athletes get from Maximize Living, the chiropractic, and Dr. Kells out of Colorado Springs, she's been with our world and Olympic teams now for almost 6 years or better. And then the head Ben Lerner was part of our Olympic effort all the way back to Atlanta in '96 before Maximize Living was even an organization.
That's right.
So we have benefited greatly, and our athletes have not only got the national help, but their own programs as well.
That's just phenomenal. And Mitch, thanks for coming today. We look forward to helping
You're
more
welcome.
athletes.
Thank you.
Have your questions for Dr. Pat answered on an episode of Maximize Living. Email Dr. Pat at cw57.tv.
Welcome back to Maximize Living. We have a guest here, Mitch Hull, who was for 20 years was the national teams director for our U.S. Olympic team. And Mitch, wrestling about 3 years ago had a real scare in the Olympics. They were cut out, which I think everyone was quite surprised. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, real scare is a good way to put it, but it's an interesting story, one that could take hours to really go over. But how it happened is relatively simple, is that the International Olympic Committee at the time was charged every 4 years, the executive committee, to recommend a sport to be eliminated so that a new sport could get on. And the reality is their position was that the bus is full, and if somebody wants to get on the bus, somebody's got to get off the bus. So what happened was we were recommended to be removed, and we had no idea. 12 hours before that meeting was taking place is when we found out we were even being considered. And what happened was it was simple. It was the leadership of our international federation was arrogant, and the actual president, Raffi Martinetti, was truly an arrogant bully and never let anybody get involved. We didn't even know we were in this situation. And they had a meeting 15 miles from his hometown of Switzerland, and he didn't even show up for it. And as one of the guys who's a friend of mine who's very involved with politics and wrestling, when I told him the story, may have summed the whole thing up better than anybody else. And he said, you know, in politics, we've got a saying is that, you know, if you're not at the dinner table, you're on the menu. And that's literally what happened to us.
It's hard to believe that could happen to wrestling, because wasn't it like the first sport?
Yeah, it was.
In the Olympics?
Yeah, and this is a story I used to explain to people when I would go out there and tell them is that, you know, it was in 776 BC is when the original Olympics came out, and wrestling was part of it. And I say, in fact, wrestling was the only sport. And it wasn't until the guy who was losing, getting beat up, took off and ran, that the people that were running the sport say, hey, you know, let's add track to this thing too. But, you know, I can't prove that, but you can't disprove it either.
Story,
I'm sticking with it. Yeah.
So what did you do? It sounds like a fascinating story. Obviously, we're in the Olympics.
Yeah. Well, what do we do? There were some main things that happened. And the first thing is that we had no chance if we didn't get rid of the president of the International Federation. And it was our person on the board, Stan Desic, who we worked with the Russians. Literally, we work with the Russians to get him removed, and the vote was 11-10 to remove him. One vote away. Literally, we were one vote away from not getting back in the Olympic Games if we wouldn't have gotten rid of him. And that was led by the United States and the Russians. And I think there were three really important things that happened in the process that showed how important the sport was. Is that one of those was Japan, who was in the bid for the 2024 Olympic Games, got 1 million signatures on a petition.
Wow.
And then we also had, you know, presidents of countries, and that we were in Iran 2 weeks after the announcement, and Ahmadinejad, who was president of the country, actually handed the awards out.
Wow.
For the World Cup, but another thing that was, too, that were really huge was that we had the Russians, the Iranians, and the Americans wrestle a match in Grand Central Station in New York. We weighed in at the UN and had our meeting there. And I think, I say backhandedly, the IOC should have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize, because no time in the history of the world have the Russians, Americans, and Iranians ever worked together in a common goal.
That's an incredible story. It's awesome. And right now you're regional training director for University of Wisconsin and the Olympics?
What we have is that I left USA Wrestling after 20 years. Is kind of a family move. I've got 2 granddaughters here, my parents and all my brothers, and that we just decided to come back here, and we did it as we set it up a regional training center, which is worked through the USA Wrestling to provide opportunities for individuals from high school through postgraduate to pursue their dreams of representing the United States potential World Olympic competition.
So high school, top wrestlers in high school get to be with the best in college and
that's the
training
goal
for the Olympics.
Yep, to give them that kind of opportunity.
Well, that's a wonderful model. Mitch, thank you for coming.
You're
we'll
welcome.
Look forward to following all our athletes in the Olympics, and we'll be right back with more Maximize Living.
Have your questions for Dr. Pat answered on an episode of Maximize Living. Email Dr. Pat at cw57.tv.
Thank you for watching Maximize Living. Whether you're a parent just starting your youngster in sports, a high school or college athlete, or a professional or Olympic athlete, your body goes through a lot. Your body needs to be maintained during and after your competitive sports years. The structure and alignment of your spine, feet, knees, hips, shoulders, elbows, and hands will play a large part in your athletic success and your durability. If this makes sense to you, I'd love to check you in my office. Call 608-833-1282 right now. You'll be glad you did. Until next time, for Maximize Living, I'm Dr. Patrick Anderson. Live well.
Have your questions for Dr. Pat answered on an episode of Maximize Living. Email Dr. Pat at cw57.tv.